They called me a gold digger before I'd even finished saying I do. His mother's eyes said it. His sister's smirk screamed it. And my husband, the man who swore he loved me, stood silent. I wasn't after their money. I was after peace. But in that mansion full of chandeliers and secrets, peace was the rarest jewel of all. If you've ever been accused of something you didn't do, if you've ever been treated like you weren't enough, then stay with me. Because this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the one they call a thief is the only person brave enough to reveal the truth. When Daniel slipped that ring on my finger, I thought I was walking into forever. He was kind, soft-spoken, the kind of man who'd open doors and mean it. But what I didn't know was that love, when tangled with money, becomes something else entirely, a test of loyalty, of pride, and sometimes survival. The first time I stepped into the Whitmore mansion, I felt the weight of generations press against my shoulders. Everything gleamed, the marble floors, the gold-framed portraits, even the air felt expensive. Margaret Whitmore, Daniel's mother, greeted me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "So, you're Ava," she said, letting her gaze travel from my simple dress to my worn heels. "Daniel told us you're a designer. How creative." Her voice dripped honey, but her words were vinegar. "Yes, ma'am," I said, smiling politely. "I design homes. Small ones, mostly." "Lovely," she replied, sipping her wine. "We do love people who start from nothing. It builds character." Daniel chuckled nervously beside me, trying to diffuse the tension. But Margaret didn't stop there. At dinner, she asked questions that weren't really questions. "Your family, do they own property? Do you plan to keep working after marriage?" And then Emily, Daniel's younger sister, laughed and said, "Don't worry, Mom. She's just making sure you're not marrying us for the inheritance." The table erupted in polite laughter. Everyone except me. Daniel looked embarrassed, but he didn't defend me. He just squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "They'll warm up to you." But I knew better. You can't warm ice. You can only break it. Later that night, as we drove back to our small apartment, I stared out the window at the dark, tree-lined streets. Daniel tried to hold my hand again. "I'm sorry about my family," he said softly. "They just have their ways." "Yeah," I murmured. "Their ways of reminding me I don't belong."
He sighed.
"Give them time. They'll see who you are." I smiled, faintly. "I think they already have, Daniel. That's what scares them." That night, I lay awake thinking about Margaret's face, the way she looked at me, not with curiosity, but calculation, like she was measuring what I'd cost them. But what none of them knew was that I didn't marry Daniel for what he had. I married him for who I thought he was. And in the end, that would be my biggest mistake and my greatest weapon. If Margaret Whitmore's smile was a weapon, her kindness was the poison that came after. She never raised her voice.
She didn't need to.
She could make you feel small with just a compliment. "Ava, dear," she'd say, running her perfectly manicured hand along the edge of a vase. "When you set the table, remember, forks on the left, knives on the right. It's fine, darling, you'll learn. You didn't grow up with formal dinners, after all." Always sweet. Always cruel. Every Sunday, Daniel and I drove back to that mansion. He called it family tradition. I called it weekly humiliation. Emily, his sister, played her role too, the perfect daughter with her trust-fund smile. She'd whisper things under her breath just loud enough for me to hear. "Do you think she even knows how to pronounce Chardonnay?"
Or,
"I heard she worked 2 jobs before meeting you, Danny. Guess all that hard work paid off." The laughter that followed was worse than the words. I tried to stay calm for Daniel's sake. I'd grown up learning to keep my chin high no matter who tried to knock it down. But one evening, their game took a darker turn. We were having dinner with Daniel's uncle, Richard, a man who rarely spoke unless there was whiskey in his hand. That night, there was plenty. Margaret leaned toward him and said, You know, Richard, I worry about Daniel. He's always been trusting, especially with money. Her gaze slid to me like a knife across glass. I just hope he's not being too generous. Richard chuckled. You mean with his lovely new wife? The laughter that followed was brittle, sharp. Daniel tried to change the subject, but I heard Margaret whisper to Richard again, this time not so softly. She's bleeding him dry, I tell you. She's already redecorating the apartment. Curtains from catalogs, jewelry, dinners. You know how these girls are. I froze. My fork clattered against the plate. Daniel's hand found mine under the table, but I pulled away. When dinner ended, I walked out first. Daniel followed, calling, Ava, please don't listen to them. I turned to him on the front steps, under that huge marble archway, my voice trembling but steady. They don't respect me, Daniel. They never will. And if you don't stop them, I will. He looked at me, tired. They're my family. I stared back. And I'm your wife. Start acting like it. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling and made a quiet promise to myself. If Margaret Whitmore wanted a war, she'd get one. But not the kind she expected. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't fight. I'd learn their rules. And then I'd beat them at their own game. 3 weeks passed before I returned to that house again. Margaret had invited us for a charity brunch. Her words, not mine. I didn't want to go, but Daniel begged me to keep the peace. So, I put on my calmest smile and my simplest dress. I wasn't there to impress them. I was there to observe. The Whitmore estate was a world built on image. Perfect lawns, perfect furniture, perfect people. But up close, the cracks were showing.
Literally.
As Margaret led a group of donors through her art gallery, I noticed something odd. One of the antique display cases had been moved. The glass was clean, but the space beneath it, dusted recently, unevenly. I might have ignored it, if it weren't for Emily's sudden shiftiness when I asked, "Did your mother get rid of that silver collection she used to brag about?" Emily froze for a second too long before smiling. "Oh, that old thing? It's being cleaned." She looked away fast. But I didn't forget. Later that day, Daniel was called into his father's study. Mr. Whitmore, stern, distant, still recovering from heart surgery, rarely spoke. When Daniel came out 20 minutes later, his face was pale. "What happened?" I asked, catching up to him. He hesitated. "Dad said the family accounts have been missing some funds. Small amounts, but they add up. Mom's blaming the staff. Do you believe that?" I pressed. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know anymore." That night, while everyone was busy toasting to the success of Margaret's charity, I slipped upstairs. My curiosity wasn't innocent anymore. It was personal. Margaret's office smelled like lilacs and secrets. Her drawers were locked, but one folder had been left open on the desk. A series of financial statements, transactions made in Daniel's name. Thousands of dollars transferred to cash accounts. All labeled with my initials, H. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Margaret wasn't just smearing my reputation. She was framing me. I stuffed one of the documents into my purse before leaving. Halfway down the hall, I nearly ran into Emily. Her eyes darted to my bag, then back to my face. "What are you doing up here?" she asked. "Looking for the bathroom," I said with a smile that could slice glass. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You should be careful snooping around, Ava. Mom doesn't like uninvited curiosity." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a snobby family trying to humiliate me. It was a family with something to hide. 3 days after that brunch, everything came crashing down. I was at work, a small interior design studio in downtown Charleston, when Daniel called. His voice was shaky, urgent. "Ava, Mom's furious. She says money's missing again. 10,000 this time, and it's been transferred from my account to yours." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I know," he said. but she has proof. You need to come here now. When I arrived at the mansion, every face in that house was waiting. Margaret at the center, Emily beside her, the father silent as always. Even the staff lingered in the doorway like spectators at a trial. Margaret held up a printed bank statement. It showed exactly what she said: $10,000 transferred from Daniel's joint account into my savings. Except, I'd never seen that account number in my life. Do you deny this, Ava? She asked, her tone calm, rehearsed. Yes, I said, my voice trembling with fury. I didn't take a dime from you people. Emily crossed her arms. Then explain how your name's on the transfer. I can't explain something I didn't do. I shot back. You're framing me. Margaret sighed dramatically, like a woman burdened by the weight of her own virtue. Sweetheart, accusations won't help. I told Daniel from the start. Money can change people. Maybe you just wanted security. Something in me snapped. Security? I had peace before I married into the circus. Daniel tried to step in. Mom, enough. But Margaret cut him off sharply. No, Daniel. You need to know the truth before this woman ruins you. She slid another paper across the table, a copy of the deed to Daniel's apartment, now bearing my signature. A forged one. I stared at it, stunned. This isn't real, I said. You know my signature. You know. But Daniel didn't answer. His silence was worse than accusation. I felt my chest tighten. You believe them? He hesitated just long enough for my heart to crack. I don't know what to believe right now. That was all it took for Margaret to smile. Perhaps, she said softly, it's time you stay elsewhere until this gets sorted. The humiliation hit like ice water. I wanted to scream, to fight, but something stopped me. Their smug faces. The trap they thought they'd built. So I stood tall, grabbed my purse, and walked to the door. But before leaving, I turned back to Margaret and said, You made one mistake. She raised an eyebrow. And what's that? You taught me exactly how low you're willing to go. Now it's my turn to play. That night, I didn't cry. I opened the folder I'd taken from her office, scanned the details, and saw something that made my stomach twist. A signature that wasn't just fake. It matched Emily's handwriting perfectly. And that's when I knew. The thief wasn't me. It was one of their own. When people betray you, their faces become masks you can't unsee. Every memory turned sharp. Every kindness poisoned. I moved into a small rental near the river, the kind of place that smelled like rain and freedom. Daniel called a few times that week, but I let it go to voicemail. What could he say? That he was sorry for doubting me? Sorry for letting his mother destroy our marriage? Sorry wasn't enough. Instead, I focused on what I had, that folder of documents I'd stolen from Margaret's office. Each page was a thread, and I started pulling. Over the next few nights, I built a timeline. Transfers. Withdrawals. Fake invoices under a company name that didn't exist. And, at the center of it all, a checking account labeled EW Consults. Emily Whitmore, the golden daughter, the thief. She'd been moving small amounts out of her father's trust fund for months, hiding them in shell accounts under other people's names, including mine. Smart. Ruthless. Too bad she'd left a trail. I needed proof no one could bury. So I reached out to someone I'd met years ago while designing a small cafe, Lucas. He wasn't just a friend. He was a quiet genius with computers and a knack for uncovering what people tried to hide. When I told him what had happened, he didn't even hesitate. Send me what you've got, he said. I'll find out where the money really went. A few nights later, he called. Ava, you're not gonna like this. He sent me screenshots. Emily's transactions tied to a hidden property account in Miami. A beach house. Purchased 2 months ago. In cash. Your sister-in-law's been stealing from her own father, Lucas said. And using you as the perfect distraction. My hands shook, but not from fear anymore. From control. For the first time, I had power. The next step was delicate. I couldn't just accuse Emily. Margaret would bury it, and Daniel would never believe me. No, I needed them to expose themselves. So I started laying bait. I called Daniel. Calm, gentle, almost forgiving. Can we talk? I asked. I want to clear things up. He agreed to meet at a cafe downtown, his idea of neutral ground. When he arrived, I noticed something strange. He looked tired, conflicted. Ava, I know you didn't do it, he said quietly. I went through our accounts again. Nothing adds up. Hope flickered in me, small but dangerous. Then tell your mother that, I said.
He sighed.
You don't understand her. If she thinks you're hiding something, she won't stop until she proves it. You need to stay away from her. I leaned in, my voice low. Maybe I don't want to stay away. He frowned. What are you planning? Something she'll never forget. That night, I emailed Lucas again. Can you trace where Emily accessed the accounts from? And can you make sure the Whitmores see it when the time is right? His reply came one line long. Already working on it. I smiled. Margaret called me a gold digger. But by the time I was done, the whole world would see who the real thief was.
They thought they'd buried me.
But I've always been better at growing in the dark. It started with an invitation, handwritten, elegant, and polite. Dinner at my place, I wrote. A peace offering. I sent one to Margaret, one to Emily, and one to Daniel. I wanted them all in one room, one night. No way to lie their way out. When they arrived, the air was tight with suspicion. Margaret walked in first, perfume strong enough to mask her venom. Emily followed, all fake innocence and sugar smiles. Daniel came last, tense, uncertain, eyes darting between us like a referee before a fight. I served dinner myself.
Simple.
Homemade. Humbling. I just wanted a chance to apologize, I began softly. For everything that's happened. For the tension. Margaret tilted her head. How gracious of you, dear. Emily smirked. Did you bake forgiveness into the casserole too? I smiled sweetly. Actually, no. But I did add something I think you'll all find interesting. I reached under the table and pressed play on my laptop. A recording filled the room, the faint hum of background noise, then Lucas's calm voice. This is the IP trail and voice capture from Emily Whitmore's online banking sessions. You can hear her confirming the transfer names and amounts. Then Emily's voice came through, crystal clear. Yes, transfer the $10,000 from Daniel Whitmore's account to H. It's just a test. She'll never notice. The color drained from her face. Margaret's smile vanished. Daniel froze. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Margaret stood up. This is absurd. Anyone could have. But I cut her off. There's more. On the screen appeared scanned copies of every fake transaction, matched to Emily's Miami property purchase. And finally, a photo of her standing on the balcony of that house 2 weeks ago, champagne in hand. Daniel's voice broke the silence. Emily, tell me this isn't real. Emily stammered. I didn't. She's setting me up. Her eyes darted toward me, wild. She's the manipulator. You don't know what she's capable of. I leaned back, calm. Funny. That's what your mother said about me. Margaret's face twisted. You tricked us. You humiliated us. I stood. No, Margaret. You did that all by yourselves. I just turned the lights on. Daniel looked shattered, caught between guilt and disbelief. Ava, I should have trusted you. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Margaret grabbed her bag, trembling with rage. You'll regret this, she hissed. I met her eyes, steady. No, I won't. But you will, when your name starts showing up in the investigation. Her lips parted. What investigation? I smiled coldly. The one your family lawyer will start tomorrow morning. I sent him everything an hour ago. She went pale. For once, Margaret Whitmore had no words. When they left, Daniel lingered at the door. I still love you, Ava, he said softly. I looked at him, the man I once would have done anything for. I know, I whispered, but love doesn't excuse blindness. And then I closed the door. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the storm roll in over the river. Some people pray for peace. I'd earn mine. But the revenge? That was just beginning. By morning, the Whitmore name was no longer golden. It was headlined. The story hit faster than even I expected. Heiress accused of embezzling family trust funds. Every local news outlet ran it. By noon, Emily's smiling charity photos were replaced with grainy shots of her storming out of her father's law office. The house that once looked untouchable now stood surrounded by whispers. Neighbors talked. Donors backed out. The foundation Margaret chaired quietly paused all events. I didn't need to lift a finger. The truth did the work for me. Daniel called that evening, voice raw. She confessed, he said. Emily's admitted everything. The money, the fake accounts, even the forged transfers. She said Mom told her to do it, to protect the family name. I didn't speak. Silence can be louder than rage. She said Mom wanted to make you look greedy, he continued softly, so no one would question the missing funds. I laughed quietly, not out of joy, but disbelief. They tried to ruin me to hide their own rot, I said. That's poetic. Daniel's voice cracked. Dad's furious. He's cutting them off. Emily's under investigation, and Mom, she's been asked to step down from the charity board. I could almost picture Margaret's perfect composure cracking. The woman who thought herself untouchable now facing public humiliation. She'll blame me, I said. She already does, he admitted. I smirked. Good. Let her remember my name every time someone asks what happened. There was a long pause before Daniel whispered, Can we talk? Please? I don't want to lose you. For a moment, I wanted to say yes. To believe that maybe love could survive deceit. But that version of me, the one who begged for acceptance, was gone. Daniel, I said gently, you didn't lose me today. You lost me the moment you chose silence over truth.
He didn't argue.
He just breathed, slow and heavy. I understand. When the call ended, I sat by the window, watching the world outside my small apartment. Simple, quiet mine. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Then a message from Lucas popped up on my screen. Check your email. You'll like this. Attached was a screenshot of a frozen bank account, Margaret Whitmore's. She tried to quietly move her assets abroad, but the federal investigation flagged it. I couldn't help but smile. Revenge isn't always about shouting. Sometimes it's about letting the silence speak for you while the guilty destroy themselves. A week later, I passed by the Whitmore mansion on my way to a client's house. For sale signs lined the driveway. The once proud gates stood open, like even the metal had given up pretending to guard their secrets. I slowed my car just long enough to whisper, "Good riddance," and drove away. A few months later, autumn rolled in. The air was colder, cleaner, as if even the wind had decided to start over. My life was smaller now, but lighter. No mansion. No whispered judgments. No pretending. Just me, my tiny apartment, my work, and the quiet sound of my own peace. I'd started taking design clients again, small businesses, cafes, single moms rebuilding after divorce. The kind of people who reminded me what honesty felt like. One afternoon, while setting up a project downtown, I saw Daniel across the street. He looked different, thinner, older, humbled. For a moment, our eyes met. He smiled, faintly, a man still learning to forgive himself. I nodded once, kindly but firmly. That was all the closure either of us needed. As I walked away, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the humiliation, the war. I used to think revenge was about destroying others. But now I knew the truth. Revenge is about reclaiming yourself. Making sure no one ever gets to rewrite your story again. Because when they called me a gold digger, what they really meant was, You don't belong here. And maybe they were right. I didn't belong in their world of fake smiles and dirty secrets. I belonged somewhere honest. Somewhere free. So, I built a new world for myself. One where I didn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. One where peace wasn't given, it was earned. And if you've ever been torn down by someone who wanted to see you break, remember this. You don't need to fight louder. You just need to rise quieter. Because nothing terrifies cruel people more than the woman who walks away unbroken. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, remember Ava's story. Sometimes silence is your sharpest weapon. Sometimes dignity is the loudest revenge. And sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's power. Because peace isn't what they give you, it's what you decide to keep.
If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen play out?